Captain Thork flexed his forearms as he studied the holographic display floating before him. The blue-green planet rotated slowly, innocent and unaware of what was coming. His mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he addressed his hunting crew. Behold, the third planet of the Sol system, home to the species that calls itself human. Thork's voice carried the confidence of someone who had never failed at anything that mattered. Intelligence reports suggest they have barely achieved interplanetary travel. Primitive weapons. No energy shields. This should be our easiest hunt yet. Navigator Grix, a nervous creature whose skin constantly shifted between worried shades of purple, peered at his instruments with typical pessimism. I don't know, Captain. Something feels off about this one. The preliminary scans show they fight each other constantly. What kind of species does that? The kind that makes excellent prey, growled weapons specialist Vask, sharpening one of his many ceremonial blades. I've been looking forward to this hunt for months. My trophy wall needs a new centerpiece. Tech expert Quilp barely looked up from his array of blinking devices. Please. These humans still use chemical propulsion for space travel. I could disable their entire planet's communication network with a basic virus protocol. This'll be over before lunch. Captain Thork nodded approvingly. The crew of the starship Ravager had conquered 47 different species across 12 sectors. Their reputation preceded them wherever they went in the galaxy. When the Vrex hunting clan arrived at a planet, civilizations usually surrendered before the first shot was fired. Remember the protocol, Thork announced, pacing the bridge with predatory grace. We take a few specimens first. Standard intimidation tactics. Once they see what we can do to their strongest warriors, the rest will fall in line. Then we establish hunting preserves across their most populated continents. The Vrex had perfected this system over centuries. They would arrive at a primitive world, demonstrate their superiority through carefully orchestrated displays of power, then transform the planet into their personal hunting ground. It was efficient, profitable, and enormously satisfying for a species that valued the thrill of the chase above all else. Target acquired, Grix reported, his skin now a lovely shade of anxious yellow. I'm detecting a small settlement with approximately 50 life signs. Isolated location. Perfect for our initial demonstration. Excellent. Thork's mandibles spread in what passed for a smile among his kind. Activate the cloaking field and take us down. Time to introduce ourselves to humanity. The Ravager descended through Earth's atmosphere like a metallic predator, invisible to human detection systems. Within the hour they would have their first human specimens aboard, and the conquest of Earth would begin in earnest. None of them bothered to wonder why the isolated settlement was surrounded by obstacle courses, firing ranges, and what appeared to be a sign reading Fort Wilderness Survival Training Academy. After all, what could possibly go wrong? The abduction beam hummed to life, and within moments, 5 confused humans materialized in the Ravager's holding bay. Captain Thork observed them through the reinforced viewport, expecting the usual cowering and wailing that marked the beginning of every successful hunt. Instead, one of the humans, a stocky man with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes, looked directly at the hidden observation window and said, "Well, this is new. Usually when I get kidnapped, there's at least a ransom note." Navigator Grix's skin immediately shifted to alarmed orange. "Captain, how did he know we were watching?" The human continued talking to the air, apparently unconcerned by his situation. "Jake Murphy, by the way. Former Marine, current survival instructor. And you guys are what, exactly?" "The welcome wagon for the galaxy's most socially awkward species." Weapons specialist Vask snarled and activated the intimidation display, flooding the holding bay with strobing lights and aggressive sound frequencies designed to terrify prey into submission. The other humans looked appropriately startled, but Jake just squinted and covered his ears. "Okay, that's just rude. You invite someone onto your ship. The least you can do is not assault them with what sounds like a dying space whale having an epileptic seizure." Dr. Rita Kowalski, a woman in her 40s with an expression of professional curiosity, stepped forward and examined the energy bars containing them. "Fascinating. The psychological profile here suggests a species that relies heavily on intimidation tactics to establish dominance. A classic overcompensation behavior. Oh great, muttered engineer Lisa Park, a petite woman who was already studying the cell's locking mechanism with obvious interest. I get abducted by aliens, and I'm stuck with the guy who thinks everything's a teaching moment and the therapist who wants to psychoanalyze our kidnappers. Chef Bobby Santos, a cheerful man in his 30s, was poking at the alien rations that had been left in their cell. These taste like cardboard made from sadness. What kind of civilization develops faster than light travel but can't figure out basic seasoning? The fifth human, demolitions expert Mike Torres, was quietly examining the walls. Structural integrity's not bad, but the welding on these joints is amateur hour. Whoever built this place has serious attention to detail issues. Captain Talk decided it was time to make his entrance. He strode into the holding bay, all four arms spread wide in a gesture meant to display his physical superiority. Humans. I am Captain Talk of the Vrex hunting clan. You are now prisoners aboard my vessel, and your world will soon become our hunting preserve. Jake tilted his head with the same expression he usually reserved for particularly slow students. Okay, couple things. First, that entrance, way too dramatic. You're trying too hard. Second, bookend. Hunting preserve? Really? That's your business model. Have you considered the environmental impact? The sustainability issues? The obvious psychological problems that led you to this career choice in the first place? Dr. Kowalski nodded approvingly. He's right about the psychological aspect. The need to hunt sentient beings suggests deep-seated feelings of inadequacy, probably stemming from childhood trauma or societal pressure to prove one's worth through violence. Captain Talk's mandibles clicked in confusion. This was not how conquered species were supposed to behave. You dare to analyze me? I am a predator. You're superior in every way. Are you, though? Jake asked, genuinely curious, because I'm getting some serious anger management red flags here. When's the last time you had a conversation that didn't involve threatening someone? Navigator Grix appeared in the doorway, his skin cycling through several shades of distressed purple. Captain, the other human settlements are responding to our presence with what appears to be curiosity? They're trying to establish communication rather than fleeing in terror. That's humans for you, Lisa called out cheerfully, having apparently picked the lock on her energy restraints but choosing to remain in place. Show us something new, and our first instinct is to take it apart and see how it works. Hope you don't have any trade secrets on this bucket. Bobby held up one of the alien rations and shook his head sadly. Seriously, who hurt you people? This is what happens when a culture gives up on joy. I bet none of you have had a decent meal in years. Captain Talk felt an unfamiliar sensation creeping up his spine. For the first time in his hunting career, he was beginning to suspect that he might be in over his head. The situation aboard the Ravager deteriorated rapidly, though not in any way the Vrex had experienced before. Instead of breaking under interrogation, the humans seemed to be settling in and making themselves comfortable. Jake had somehow convinced tech expert Quilp to show him the ship's technical specifications, ostensibly so Jake could understand his captors better, but actually because Jake was treating the whole situation like an impromptu field trip. See, this is your problem right here, Jake said, pointing at a schematic. Your power distribution system is completely centralized. One good hit to your main reactor, and you lose everything. That's not hunting ship design. That's flying coffin design. Quilp's skin flushed with indignant blue. Our ships have conquered dozens of worlds. Against species with inferior technology, Jake corrected. What happens when you run into someone with comparable firepower? This ship's got more vulnerabilities than a reality TV show star. Meanwhile, Dr. Kowalski had cornered Navigator Grix in what appeared to be an impromptu therapy session. Tell me about your childhood, Grix. Were you always this anxious, or did the hunting lifestyle contribute to your obvious stress disorders? I'm not stressed, Grix protested, his skin cycling through panicked yellow to defensive orange. I'm a professional navigator. I've guided successful hunts across the galaxy. And how do you feel about those hunts now? Any guilt? Recurring nightmares? Difficulty forming meaningful relationships outside of this predatory hierarchy? Grix's skin went completely white. How did you know about the nightmares? Chef Bobby had taken over a corner of the galley, much to the horror of the Vrex crew. Look, I get it. You're space nomads, you eat whatever keeps you alive. But there's no excuse for food that tastes like it was prepared by someone who views flavor as a personal enemy. He held up what passed for Vrex cuisine. This protein paste has the consistency of regret and the flavor profile of existential despair. When's the last time any of you actually enjoyed a meal? Weapons specialist Vask, who had been watching this display with growing agitation, finally exploded. We are hunters. We do not concern ourselves with trivial pleasures like taste. And that right there is your problem, Bobby said, seasoning something that smelled infinitely better than anything the Ravager's galley had ever produced. You've stripped all the joy out of living. No wonder you're so angry all the time. Engineer Lisa had been suspiciously quiet, which should have concerned the Vrex more than it did. She'd been systematically examining every system she could access, making small improvements that somehow made everything work better, while simultaneously gathering intelligence about their technology. Your environmental controls are running inefficiently, she mentioned casually to Quilp. Mind if I adjust the atmospheric processes? The air in here is stale. Absolutely not. That system is. Quilp paused as the air suddenly became noticeably fresher and more comfortable. How did you do that? Optimized the filtration cycle and adjusted the oxygen mixture. You've been running at about 60% efficiency. Also, your gravity generator was miscalibrated. You're probably all dealing with chronic joint pain from the uneven gravitational field. The crew looked around at each other, suddenly realizing they did feel better than they had in months. Demolitions expert Mike Taurus had been the quietest of all, but his silence was the most ominous. He'd been studying the ship's structure with the intense focus of someone who understood exactly how things came apart. You know, he said conversationally to Captain Thok, this whole hunting thing seems like a lot of work. All this travel, the logistics, the psychological warfare. Have you ever considered just talking to species before you hunt them? You might be surprised what you learn. Captain Thok felt his authority slipping away like sand through his claws. We are predators. We do not negotiate with prey. But you're not very good predators, are you? Jake asked with devastating casualness. I mean, you picked up 5 humans from what you thought was a defenseless settlement, and now they're running your ship better than you are. The worst part was, he wasn't wrong. The environmental systems were working perfectly for the first time in years. The food actually tasted good. Navigator Grix seemed calmer after his talk with Dr. Kowalski, and even Quilp had to admit that Lisa's improvements to the technical systems were genuinely helpful. Captain Thok began to suspect that somewhere along the way, his carefully planned hunt had gone catastrophically off the rails. 3 hours later, the situation had progressed from unusual to completely unprecedented in the annals of Vrex hunting history. The humans were no longer contained in the holding bay, but this wasn't because they had escaped. It was because Jake had convinced Captain Thok that proper prisoner management required building trust through structured interaction. See, the problem with your traditional intimidation approach, Jake explained as he led what could only be described as a team-building exercise in the ship's main cargo bay, is that it creates an adversarial relationship right from the start. You're immediately establishing a dynamic based on fear and resentment. The entire Vrex crew was participating in what Jake called trust falls, though given their 4-armed physiology, the mechanics were somewhat complicated. This is ridiculous, weapons specialist Vask grumbled as he reluctantly caught Navigator Grix, who had been surprisingly willing to participate once Dr. Kowalski assured him it was therapeutic exposure therapy for his trust issues. Ridiculous, but effective, Dr. Kowalski observed, taking notes on a tablet Lisa had somehow jury-rigged from Vrex technology. Notice how Vask's aggressive posturing has decreased by approximately 40% since we started these exercises. I am not posturing, Vask protested, which might have been more convincing if he hadn't just helped Grix to his feet with uncharacteristic gentleness. Chef Bobby had completely taken over the galley, and the transformation was remarkable. For the first time in their lives, the Vrex crew was experiencing what Bobby called food that doesn't hate you. The secret, Bobby explained to a fascinated Quilp, is understanding that eating should be enjoyable. You've been treating nutrition like a military operation instead of a celebration. Tech expert Quilp was having his own crisis as Lisa continued to help with the ship's systems. I don't understand how you're improving our technology with what appears to be random modifications. It's not random, Lisa said patiently. It's adaptive. Your systems are designed to work, but not to work together efficiently. You've been brute forcing solutions instead of finding elegant ones. She gestured to a display that was now running smoother than it ever had. See how the power distribution is automatically adjusting to demand now. Your original programming was fighting itself. Mike Torres had taken a different approach. He'd befriended the Vrex maintenance crew and was now giving them an impromptu lecture on structural engineering while supposedly helping with ship repairs. The thing about building something to last, Mike explained as he welded a joint that had been giving them problems for months, is that you have to think about stress distribution. You can't just make everything stronger, you have to make it smarter. Captain Thorke watched all of this from the bridge with a growing sense of existential dread. His carefully trained crew of elite hunters was now learning trust exercises from their supposed prey, eating food that actually tasted good, working with technology that functioned better than ever, and apparently enjoying themselves more than they had in years. Captain, Navigator Greeks appeared beside him, and Thorke noticed that his skin was a calm, healthy shade of blue instead of its usual anxious purple. I've been thinking about what Dr. Kowalski said about our hunting practices. What about them? Thorke asked warily. Well, she pointed out that we've never actually asked ourselves why we hunt. I mean, beyond the tradition of it, what are we really getting out of this lifestyle? It was a question Captain Thorke had never considered, and he discovered he didn't have a good answer. Jake appeared on the bridge, somehow having acquired access to areas that should have been restricted. Hey, Captain. Great ship you've got here. Terrible leadership structure. But great ship. My leadership structure is perfectly adequate. Is it, though? Jake settled into the co-pilot's chair without permission. Because from what I've observed, you've got a crew of highly skilled individuals who are all operating at about half their potential because they're too stressed, poorly fed, and working with inefficient systems. He gestured toward the main display, where the rest of the crew could be seen actually working together for what was possibly the first time ever. Look at them. Greeks isn't having anxiety attacks every 5 minutes. Vask is collaborating instead of just threatening people. Quilp is learning instead of just assuming he knows everything. Bobby's got them all actually enjoying their meals. Lisa's made your ship run better than it has in years. Mike's fixed problems you didn't even know you had. Captain Thorke stared at his crew and realized with growing horror that Jake was absolutely right. So here's my question, Jake continued conversationally. If 5 humans can improve your entire operation in less than a day, what does that say about your management style? For the first time in his career as a galactic predator, Captain Thorke was beginning to wonder if maybe he was the one who needed to be conquered. By the end of the first day aboard the Ravager, the ship was running more efficiently than it had in its entire operational history. By the end of the second day, the Vrex crew was functioning as a cohesive unit for the first time ever. By the end of the third day, Captain Thorke was having what could only be described as a complete emotional breakdown. I don't understand what's happening, he confessed to Jake, who had somehow become his unofficial counselor. We captured you. You're supposed to be our prisoners. Instead, you've taken over our ship and made everything better. We haven't taken over anything, Jake corrected gently. We've just been helping you reach your potential. The question is, why does that terrify you so much? Dr. Kowalski had set up what appeared to be the galaxy's first interstellar therapy practice in the ship's conference room. Navigator Greeks had become her most dedicated patient, working through what she described as centuries of culturally imposed anxiety disorders. The thing is, Grix was saying during his afternoon session, I never wanted to be a hunter. I became a navigator because I love exploring, seeing new worlds, meeting new species. But somewhere along the way, it became about conquest instead of discovery. And how does that make you feel? Dr. Kowalski asked, which was apparently a question no one had ever bothered to ask Grix before. Terrible, he admitted, his skin cycling through shades of relief and regret. We've destroyed so many beautiful civilizations. For what? Trophies? Reputation? I can't even remember anymore. Tech expert Quilp was having his own crisis in the engineering section, where Lisa had not only improved every system on the ship but had started teaching him entirely new approaches to technology design. The problem with your tech, Lisa explained as she rewrote his quantum processing algorithms in real time, is that it's designed by engineers who think complexity equals sophistication. But the best solutions are usually the simplest ones. But we've conquered dozens of worlds with this technology. Sure, but imagine what you could have accomplished if you'd used it to help those worlds instead of conquering them. You've got faster than light travel, advanced medicine, energy systems that could end scarcity. Instead of sharing any of that, you turned it all into weapons. Quilp stared at the improved systems surrounding him and experienced what humans might recognize as shame. Chef Bobby had transformed not just the galley but the entire crew's relationship with food and, by extension, with pleasure itself. Weapons specialist Vask, of all people, had become his most enthusiastic student. I never realized that preparing food could be a form of art, Vask said, as he carefully seasoned what Bobby had taught him to make. Among my people, cooking is considered a menial task. That's because your people have forgotten how to enjoy life, Bobby replied. When you strip away all pleasure, all beauty, all joy, what's left? Just anger and emptiness. No wonder you became hunters. Mike Torres had been working with the maintenance crew, and his influence had spread throughout the ship's operational culture. Instead of just fixing problems as they arose, the crew was now preventing them through better design and regular maintenance. See, the thing about building things to last, Mike explained to a group of fascinated Vrex engineers, is that you have to care about the future. You can't just think about what works right now. You have to think about what will still be working 100 years from now. It was a philosophy that extended far beyond engineering, and everyone knew it. The breaking point came when Captain Torque found himself alone with Jake in his private quarters, surrounded by the trophies of dozens of conquered worlds. "Tell me about your father," Jake said quietly, and Thog nearly jumped out of his skin. "How did you? Who told you about?" "Nobody had to tell me. It's written all over your command style, your need to prove yourself, your trophy collection. You're trying to live up to something, aren't you?" Captain Thorpe looked at the skull of a Zalarian warrior, the crown of a Thaxian emperor, the ceremonial blade of a Corvan war chief. Trophies that had once filled him with pride now seemed like monuments to emptiness. "He was the greatest hunter in Vrex history," Thog said quietly. "Captain Gorth the Relentless. They say he never failed at a hunt, never showed mercy, never questioned the path of the predator. And you've been trying to be him ever since." "I have been him. I am him. I've conquered more worlds than—" "No," Jake interrupted gently. "You've been trying to be him, but you're not him, are you? You're you, and maybe it's time to figure out what that means." For the first time since his father's death, Captain Thok allowed himself to cry. And for the first time in his life, he wondered what kind of person he might have been if he'd never tried to be anyone else. The humans had done more than escape captivity or turn the tables on their captors. They had accomplished something far more devastating. They had forced an entire crew of galactic predators to confront the possibility that they might be better people than they had ever imagined. 2 weeks later, the Ravager returned to Earth, but not as a hunting vessel. Captain Thok stood on the bridge, watching the blue-green planet grow larger in the view screen, and marveled at how different everything looked when you weren't planning to conquer it. "So let me get this straight," he said to Jake, who had somehow become his unofficial advisor on everything from ship management to career transitions. "You want us to become what exactly?" "The cultural exchange specialists," Jake replied cheerfully. "Think about it. You've got faster than light travel. We've got social sciences. You understand alien psychology. We understand human psychology. Together we could help species learn from each other instead of destroying each other." Dr. Kowalski had established what she was calling the galaxy's first interspecies therapy network, with Navigator Grix as her first certified alien counselor. "The demand is incredible," she reported during their daily staff meeting. "Apparently, conquest-based societies have massive psychological problems. Who could have predicted that?" Grix, whose skin now maintained a healthy blue-green most of the time, had embraced his new career with enthusiasm. "I never realized how much I enjoyed helping people work through their problems. It's so much more satisfying than just navigating to new worlds so we can destroy them." Tech expert Quilp and engineer Lisa had formed what they called the Galactic Technology Improvement Initiative, offering to upgrade alien civilizations instead of conquering them. "Turns out, Dan," Lisa explained, "most species are happy to share their resources when you're helping them instead of threatening them. Revolutionary concept. Apparently, Chef Bobby had become something of a celebrity. His cooking show, Feeding the Galaxy, was broadcast across 17 star systems and had reportedly prevented 2 wars by introducing competing species to each other's cuisine. "Hard to hate someone after you've shared a good meal with them," he explained to his millions of viewers. Mike Torres had started a consulting firm specializing in sustainable infrastructure for developing civilizations. "Instead of building weapons to conquer planets, we're building schools, hospitals, and communication networks. Weird how much better that feels." Weapons specialist Vask had undergone the most dramatic transformation of all. He'd retrained as a conflict resolution specialist, using his intimate knowledge of violence to help others avoid it. "Turns out, when you really understand how to hurt people, you also understand how to help them feel safe." The former crew of the Ravager had become Earth's first alien exchange students. They attended Jake's survival courses not to learn how to hunt humans, but to learn how humans had survived and thrived despite being physically inferior to most galactic species. The secret, Jake explained to his mixed class of humans and aliens, isn't being the strongest or the smartest or the most technologically advanced. It's being adaptable. It's being willing to learn from anybody, including your enemies. It's understanding that cooperation usually works better than competition. For if it's a one-scotion. Captain Talk, who now went by the title Interspecies Relations Coordinator, had discovered that helping civilizations was far more challenging and rewarding than conquering them. The leadership, he had learned, isn't about making people fear you. It's about helping them become better than they thought they could be. The final irony wasn't lost on anyone involved. The Vrex had come to Earth expecting to find primitive prey, only to discover that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or strength, but something far more terrifying, and the ability to see potential in others and the determination to help them reach it. "You know what the funny thing is?" Jake mused as he watched the former galactic predators teaching conflict resolution techniques to a delegation from the Andromedan Council. They never really wanted to be hunters. They just needed someone to show them there were other options. Dr. Kowalski nodded approvingly. A classic case of learned behavior modification through positive reinforcement and environmental restructuring. In other words, Bobby added with a grin, they just needed better food and some friends who believed in them. Lisa looked up from the new communication array she was installing to connect Earth with the growing network of allied civilizations. "So, what's next?" "We've got about 40 former conquest fleets that have heard about our program and want to sign up." Jake smiled as he watched Captain Talk patiently mediating a dispute between 2 species that had been at war for generations. "Next, we teach the galaxy that the best way to prove you're superior isn't to conquer everyone else. It's to help everyone else become superior too." And so humanity's first contact with an alien species ended not with war, conquest, or submission, but with something far more revolutionary, a business partnership based on the radical idea that everyone could be better than they were, if someone just bothered to help them figure out how. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time in cosmic history, that was actually a good thing.